A conversation between Presidents Putin and Xi was picked up last year on camera. Microphones picked up their translators. You might remember the scene, two autocrats shooting the breeze, talking about living to 150. There appears to be more to that. This week, the Wall Street Journal looked deeper into Putin's apparent quest to avoid the Grim Reaper. I'm going to talk to the Wall Street Journal's chief European political correspondent, the award-winning Bojan Pancevski, in just a moment. First, a reminder of that conversation. Some predict that within the century it might be possible to live to 150. Let's talk more about it to the chief European political correspondent, Bojan Pancevski. Welcome to France 24, Bojan. Great to have you on the programme.
Hello, hi, good to be on.
It's been a while since our Brussels days, so it is good to see you. First of all, take us into this age-defying or attempt at anti-aging world of President Putin. Where did it take you?
It's very interesting maze of kind of scientific projects and perhaps also a bit pseudo-scientific projects. But in any event, his concern with age is not obviously untypical for a man in his mid-70s, but it's also very popular in the United States and elsewhere. You know, longevity studies, longevity research is something that a lot of people, you know, from Jeff Bezos to whoever else from Silicon Valley is interested in. So he's right up there with these people, and he seems to be extremely interested. Well, the scientists he supports with state funding seem to be working on several projects. One of them is to be able to replace human organs as they age or become affected by illness. And that would kind of allow people to have a longer youth or prolong their lifespan. There are two ways to do this that are being researched in Russia. One of them is 3D printing. It's so-called bioprinting, essentially creating organs in a lab. And then the other one is growing organs inside this porcine species called mini pigs. Both methods are also being researched elsewhere, but Putin was kind of directly referring to with a certain certainty that it will work out. Whereas if you talk to actual scientists who work on such issues, they say it's far from certain that this will work out. But he showed himself to be quite keen and seems to believe that this will eventually happen, or even quite soon, as he suggested in that conversation.
And it's become wider, as you report, than a personal obsession. It's become a sort of state-backed priority.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Well, you know, he's an autocrat. He runs a kind of top-down system where he can drive funding wherever he wants, essentially. And this is a national, now what they call in Russia, they have several so-called national initiatives in healthcare. And this one is the National Longevity Initiative, basically. And I think they've allocated or pledged to allocate the equivalent of around $26 billion for basically expanding life and research into this field. And it is something really that he's deeply, profoundly interested in. I mean, he had several longevity gurus. One of them sadly died. He didn't get that old. He was 77 years old. Putin personally gave him one of the highest decorations of the Russian Federation. And this guy, interestingly, was his name is Dr. Havinson, and he researched peptides. These are these kind of small chain proteins that are popular at the moment in the United States. The Secretary of Health, RFK Jr., is a great believer in them. He tries to make them more accessible to the American public, and apparently Putin was interested in that too. And, you know, the guy who advocated that said that human beings are designed to live 120 years at a minimum, And he quoted the Bible as a source for this claim, although he's a kind of a highly credentialed scientist. And I guess it's slightly ironic that he died at age 77. But now he's got another longevity guru, a guy who heads one of the top scientific institutes in Russia, previously the Soviet Union. And this guy enjoys a lot of funding and personal sort of friendship with Putin, and he's trying to kind of push things forward. Putin himself is known to also engage in various kind of practices that he believes are beneficial for his health. One of them is a so-called cryotreatment. And I got this directly from a leader, the former Chancellor of Austria, Sebastian Kurz, who told me when he visited the Kremlin, they spent a lot of time talking. In fact, Putin was talking to him about the cryotreatment, and he explained that he's got this cryo chamber, which is basically a reverse sauna, in which he spends a certain amount of time every day standing there naked. And the cryo chamber is it has ultra low temperatures, I think something like minus 170 Fahrenheit. So, he's quite keen to test scientific as well as sort of less scientific but interesting ways of taking care of his health.
Yeah, you've just given us an image that it's hard to get out of our heads right now. I'll try to. You've also discovered, which is also I think
you must have seen all these pictures of him
on the horseback,
right?
Course.
I mean, he's not an unfrequent sight to type in Putin in Google, and then a picture shows up of him sort of half naked at the beach or on horseback or riding a Harley Davidson or whatever.
An old school influencer, Kremlin at its finest, putting out the optics constantly on the strongman. One thing you have discovered, Bojan, is that he might not be getting the best of information. You spoke to a Russian scientist who pioneered bioprinting in the country, as you talked about, and he left Russia. What's he been saying?
Well, he left Russia in unclear circumstances, but he had a very big and successful company in biotech, which he was forced to sell, and that company now works with the government. And he said that all these optimistic statements that come from the scientists who are close to Putin, and in fact from Putin himself, are not backed by studies published in reputable journals. And in kind of mainstream science, if you don't have a peer-reviewed study, then it's hard to know what kind of progress you've achieved as a researcher. And he said that, barring the possibility that their actual science is secret and they don't want to publish it, he seems to think that the lack of published data indicates that they're not actually that advanced, that they're telling Putin that they are, and in order to draw ever more funding, but they haven't really achieved tremendous results so far. So, it remains to be seen. Putin will turn 74 this year, so we'll see about obviously his aim is to go 150, as he said, so remains to be seen.
You talked about Jeff Bezos, Peter Thiel as well, the very public advocate of radical life extension. There's the longevity influencer as well, Brian Johnson, who runs this so-called Rejuvenation Olympics. But there's a degree of transparency to some of their research, isn't there? Well, this is perhaps unsurprisingly secretive, driven by his inner circle and his daughter too.
Yes, Maria Vorontsova, she's an endocrinologist. She's a doctor, and she has received a substantial grant recently to research in fields adjacent to longevity studies. So, there's a close personal family member who's involved in this. She, I'm not able to speak about her credentials. Some scientists consider it controversial that she's able to receive funding for obvious reasons, because she's the daughter of the almighty president of the Russian Federation. But, it just kind of hammers home how important this is to Putin and perhaps his family. Putin has been talking about longevity for quite a long time. In fact, it wasn't really noticed because these are bits and pieces that he drops in various interviews and public statements going back over a decade. But I think as he gets older, he more frequently tends to speak and more clearly about the actual science he supports. And obviously, we all know and we have seen that he's keen to project an image of a virile, healthy male. We discussed his photo shoots, and this is something that's quite relevant, obviously, for him as a political figure, because this is the political kind of PR that he projects, or that the people around him who take care of political communication project. But it's obviously something that preoccupies him. He's unusually preoccupied with bodily decay and health, and that was in full display during the COVID pandemic. Like no other leader I can think of, he took extreme and very obvious precautions not to be infected by COVID. We all remember that enormously long table when foreign dignitaries would visit him. They would sit at the other end of an extremely long table at the Kremlin, and the reason for that was essentially for him not to get in contact with their potential germs. And then the Kremlin also confirmed that they had built this kind of long disinfection tunnels, where if you went to the Kremlin, you had to undergo a procedure of kind of becoming disinfected and so on.
Yeah, Dmitry Peskov, I remember the spokesman, wasn't he, talking about you be sprayed down. There are cameras as well, thermo checks as well, to make sure that the germs stay away. There are two types of reports and rumour that swirl around on Putin. His supposedly fastidious diet and eccentric bloodbaths as well. What did you make of the articles about Putin bathing in the blood of Siberian deer because of its supposed benefits?
Well, apparently, I mean, I looked into this, but I couldn't really find evidence of it, so I didn't include it in my own research. But it's certainly very intriguing. A lot of sort of credible Russian investigators, investigative journalists have reported this. They reported that Sergei Shoigu, who's head of the National Security Council and a close ally and friend, I think, of Vladimir Putin, and he comes from the region of Altai, he introduced him to this ancient practice of bathing in the blood derived from young deer antlers. They kind of rip out the tiny little antlers of young deer, and they create this kind of bath for people to bathe in, and apparently it has enormous sort of positive effect on the human body. I didn't find evidence of him having done that, but I did find that there is a huge tourist industry that has grown in the area where this is being practiced, because people do believe that he goes there and does that. So a lot of Russians essentially go there. It's a huge industry now, and it's being advertised as Putin's kind of deer antler blood baths. So that's again another sort of aspect of this less conventional interest that he has in various treatments and procedures that are not necessarily something you've seen in a credentialed medical journal.
It's a great read in the Wall Street Journal, Bojan, and I recommend it. I also want to talk to you about something else. Your book is to be published in 2 weeks. It's called The Nordstream Conspiracy, the inside story of the explosions that shook the world. This is an incredible story. This is the sabotage back in 2022 of an undersea pipeline that provided gas between Russia and Germany, almost cost as much as Putin's longevity initiative, 20 billion euros this was. And there were theories, it was Russia, the CIA, was it Ukraine? Yours is the most incisive account yet of who done it, who green-lighted it. And you talked to some of the saboteurs.
Yes, indeed. I've worked on the story for over 3 years, and I managed to track down the people behind this sabotage operation. It was an operation of the Ukrainian military forces. It was a group of people, a group of intelligence officers, military officers, and civilian divers, deep sea divers, who kind of planned and executed this attack. They were embedded in one of the most elite special forces units of the Ukrainian army. And the attack was planned almost immediately after the full-scale invasion of the 24th February 2022. Sometime in April, I think in early April, they started brainstorming the ideas, and the original plan was to hit both Nordstream in the Baltic Sea, as well as Turkstream, the pipeline that connects Russia and Turkey underneath the Black Sea, and then kind of ships gas up into the European Union. That part of the operation failed for reasons you can read in my book. But then, it was an incredible sort of whodunit, a great mystery. A lot of conspiracy theories were swirling around largely because the investigation into this was classified. So it was very difficult to find any official data on what investigators were doing or what actually were the theories about what happened. I managed also to speak not only to the perpetrators, or rather to the people who carried out the attack, but also to the detectives who are hunting them. So the story of the book is basically these two stories intertwined of the sort of top-notch detective team and the top-notch team of saboteurs.
Wow.
And I think there will be a crescendo to this story quite soon in a court in Hamburg in Germany, because one suspect has been arrested and will be put on trial at some point in late June or early July. And that will be extremely politically charged, because I hear the prosecutors will say that he is being accused of having done this in the service of the Ukrainian state. And as we know, Germany is the biggest backer of Ukraine at the moment. So it will be politically a very difficult, very challenging time for both Berlin as well as Kiev.
Was just the same suspect? Wasn't there a suspect within your book that you look at arrested in Poland, but Poland appear to be reluctant to extradite, given the effect it has had on Russia?
Well, indeed, the Poles were among the people who hated the pipeline the most. In my book, I compared the Nordstream pipeline system, which was the biggest offshore pipeline system in the world. I compared it to the murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. There was a victim who got killed, and everyone hated the victim. So everyone on the train became a suspect. The Poles equally, hated the pipeline, and when they received a request from German authorities to arrest a suspect who was and is living in Poland, essentially the first time around they let him go, and he was able to return to Ukraine. Then he returned back to Poland because his family lives there. He got arrested again by a sheer coincidence, and he got put in court, where a judge ruled that the arrest warrant from Germany should not be executed, because whether or not the person was guilty, the war of Ukraine against Russia is a just war. So if he had indeed done it, it was a good thing. I mean, I'm obviously summarizing. And essentially, it was a bad thing to build the pipeline and not to blow it up. And and the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, essentially pretty much tweeted the same thing, saying things like the Germans should be quiet about this instead of complaining, and saying that building Nord Stream was the original problem and not destroying it. So an interesting tension between two neighbors, partners, EU member states, NATO member states. The pipeline story has been generating a lot of tension and friction within the Western alliance.
And you also take us right there. You take us to the person who we think placed the detonators. This is a story of Frey, an erotic model in Kyiv, who's a key player. I also want to mention President Zelensky's role as well, because he appears to have green-lighted it, but then tried to call it off.
Yes, well, he denies that. It's important to say that he has denied this a number of times. His advisors have denied it. They told me that they, together with the president, first they found out about this when they saw the pictures on television. They were sitting together in the presidential palace and saw, allegedly, that's what they claim, they saw the explosions, and that's how they found out. The former military leadership of Ukraine says something else. They claim that Zelensky was at one point briefed on the operation and that he gave it a nod. They don't claim that he was involved or that he had any kind of operational role in it, but that he was aware of it, made aware of it in the early stage, and didn't think much of it, but then apparently tried to call it off. It's important to say that the CIA got wind of the operation just before it was meant to be executed. The original date of execution was scheduled for the 19th of June, 2022. And then the CIA kind of scrambled to prevent this from happening. They warned the Ukrainians not to do it, and they warned the Germans to beware that this conspiracy was underfoot. The Ukrainian team that was preparing the sabotage postponed it then, and they only kind of executed the original plan in late September the same year, a few months later.
It sounds like it's going to be a fantastic read, Bojan. The Nordstream conspiracy, the inside story of the explosions that shook the world. Out in a couple of weeks' time, mid-June. Bojan, thank you so much for your time tonight.
My great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. All the best with the book. I hope we get to talk again soon.